Hello and welcome. This first comment addressed specifically to me, saying, "You say that one should meditate at least 1 hour each day." So I probably have said that, yes. Do you recommend absolute beginners to also do that? 1 hour will be very difficult and frustrating for beginners like me. So therefore I put off meditating, since it's so threatening. So I wonder why you recommend 1 hour. So there's no real division between absolute beginners and people who have been meditating a long time. The difference is in how you are meditating and what you are doing when you are meditating. It is also not the length of time you meditate for, but the quality of that meditation. So I know people who have been meditating for many, many years, decades, whom are quite capable of sitting for hours on end, but often engaged in many mental activities, thinking, even wholesome mental activities such as radiating metta, scanning the 32 parts of the body. These very activities, contemplations on subjects such as anicca, impermanence, dukkha, suffering, anatta, not self. This isn't specifically Buddhist meditation, however. The skills to be able to contemplate those subjects come as a result of developing the quality of samadhi, concentrated focus. Focusing your attention, bringing your conscious awareness to one single point, one meditation object. So if you're able to sit for 10-15 minutes and immediately bring your focus of attention to that meditation object without distraction, without mental thought, without feelings of the body making you feel uncomfortable, making you want to move, then you're skilled in meditation, you have the quality of samadhi, focused conscious awareness, concentration, and needn't perhaps meditate for very long, although once having become absorbed in that focus, you'll want to sit for a long time. The reason I suggest an hour is because most of that hour will be spent not in meditation, but trying to get used to the idea of simply sitting in one place, sitting still. And it can take sometimes many years, many decades for people to be able to find even a few moments of real focused attention, samadhi, in that meditation. So if it's daunting, yes, you can begin with shorter sits. If it's physically impossible for you to sit, well, it's never physically impossible. If it's physically uncomfortable, then try a different way of sitting. There are 4 postures for meditation: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. I'm usually referring to the sitting posture when I refer to developing samadhi. So assuming you're sitting, you could sit in a chair, not a padded, comfortable sofa where you lean here and you lean there and have cushions all around you, but something like a hard stool, a plastic upright chair where you sit upright and remain awake and alert in this posture, this sitting posture, much like when you're sitting on the floor as I am at the moment, you see. So my spine has to be erect and shoulders in line with my elbows, in line with my hips, and when we're sitting in this posture, we're maintaining wakefulness throughout the time. And yes, for beginners this can seem a little daunting at first, but you also need a lot of time either side of as you become absorbed to get used to it. So there's nothing cast in stone. I suggest an hour in the morning after you wake up and an hour in the evening before you go to sleep, because this is easy time to find. We all have a time after we wake up and a time before we go to sleep where we're not necessarily active or engaged in any activities, either mentally or of other activities of body, speech and mind. So we can shorten our time of sleep a little to afford us this valuable opportunity to meditate. Daunting, difficult, frustrating, perhaps you're also approaching it as a bit of a task and not something you want to do. If that's the case, try and look at it as something that is going to be enjoyable. Find a way of enjoying your meditation. It is actually in itself an enjoyable activity, which is why people spend so much time engaged in the pastime of meditation. Once you understand what it isn't something you have to have an agenda for. It isn't something that has to have its own step-by-step procedure. Just give yourself that break. You don't consider going to sleep at night a task or daunting. If someone says now you're going to have the opportunity to sleep for an extra couple of hours, so you'll have 12 hours sleep tonight, whereas normally you only have 10, you wouldn't say, oh no, that's really daunting, I've got to sleep for an extra 2 hours. You'd see that as a wonderful opportunity to have an extra 2 hours valuable rest for both your body and your mind. Well, meditation is essentially rest for both your body and your mind, and time to recuperate. It is far more restorative than sleep. You're not tossing, you're not turning, you're not dreaming. You're engaged in doing absolutely nothing except anchoring your conscious awareness to one thing only, something very unstimulating, but also enough to maintain your interest and hold your attention. That is the breath, breathing in and out. So let's not cast in stone that hour, but if it allows you time to get used to meditation and find your comfortable time, then just think of it as that. All of this, all of the teachings of Buddhism are to be tried for yourself and experienced for yourself. It's not doctrinal. It isn't you must meditate for 1 hour, otherwise you're a failure. If you have the opportunity to sit for an hour, and part of that is really good meditation, it's great. But there's no bad meditation either. If your mind is wandering, at least you've had an hour to observe how much your mind can think and wander in that hour. As long as you're maintaining mindfulness, this is constructive and useful meditation. And the more you practice, the more you develop the skills of becoming absorbed into samadhi naturally. Kindly give a lecture on what the postures to get prajna are. I think this is a Google Translate, so I'll try and put it into better English. Kindly give a lecture on what postures, I think means methods to get wisdom from the Dharjaka Sutta. So this is Google Translate, so excuse my misinterpretation. It was written in Sinhalese script. So let me just say what the Dharjaka Sutta is. It's an expansion on the reflections on the Triple Gem, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Itipiso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho, that I chant every morning here, live at 6 a.m, followed by the reflections on the qualities of the Dharma. So the 9 qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the Dharjaka Sutta is an expansion upon that to give enthusiasm. I think I'm right in saying that. I'm having to do this from memory because I didn't look it up. When going into situations and dealing with everyday life, just to give enthusiasm for having taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So this isn't specifically a way that we are developing wisdom. I assume the word that translate by Google to translate here is prajnana, is actually referring really to panya, which is the Pali word for wisdom. This comes as a result of taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, following the Dharma, the teachings, understanding the Dharma. This is wisdom in itself. So I wouldn't give a lecture even if I fully understood the question here on one particular sutta. I never do that. I ask that you read those suttas yourselves, and any questions arising from them, bring them to me and we'll discuss. But I personally believe the suttas are written, once translated by good translators in our own mother tongues, are quite adequately and sufficiently explaining the point they're getting to in themselves. I don't need to lecture on them and see no need to even listen to lectures on them, about them, expansions on them, commentaries on them. I prefer to just read them as close as they can ever be considered to be the words of the Buddha, in that state, in my own language, and then any questions arising from my understanding, right or wrong, will come about through my practice of that. So when I'm sitting in meditation, if I've read something in the Anapanasati Sutta and it's a struggle, it's not seeming right, or something's not as I thought it, I understood it, soon it will become clear because I'm trying it out, I'm putting it into practice. If you reflect daily on the qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, as I do each morning with Itipiso and so on, you are just giving yourself mindful recollection of those qualities and that you've taken refuge in the Triple Gem. So I hope I've not too misinterpreted your question there. Okay, I'm going to have to skip that to one I've highlighted. So I'm getting some rather long comments, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's very difficult. I have to read a lot of comments. I don't have to, but I enjoy to read a lot of comments. But the long ones, this is really not a forum for voicing opinions or offering your own commentaries on various subject matters. There are other places, I'm sure, if you can do that, but I do invite your comments and questions, usually relating to the video that you're watching at the time. If the comments are too long, then I have to go through them to just find a specific question within. So in this next comment again, which is very long, I've just had the opportunity to quickly highlight where I saw a question. Oh, it's not a question, it's more a comment. It says that I've answered this already in another talk. It says that I'm being judgmental when it comes to speaking about Mahayana and subsequent schools of Buddhism, where I said about optional extras. If you remember, I referred to that before, didn't I? Well, it is. A lot of it is added on. It's not judgmental. I'm never critical. I'm explaining that there's a lot of extras in there for one to learn and pick up. Tibetan Buddhism is a wonderful system of education, but they are proud that it takes 12 years to even be at the level of basic understanding of that system of training. Whereas the Buddha wasn't teaching that. The Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, like yourselves, can be practiced from day one. So this is why I gravitate towards Theravada. And then you say, why do you not mention that Pali Canon is also later interpretations of Gautama may have said, or what he may have said or may not have said? Well, I do, often. It was written down later, but closest to the actual origins of those teachings, time-wise, chronologically, because it was geographically closer to its origins. Whether it's later or earlier, it doesn't really matter. We're only taking the core teachings, the core content of those teachings from either the Pali Canon or its sister Sanskrit teachings, the sutras as opposed to the suttas. They're all similar, with various, the Pali Canon being, I would suggest, the skeletal form, which implies to me it has less commentary aspect to it. But I'm sure I've spoken at length about that before. I'm never saying that it's the actual exact interpretation of the words of the Buddha. We can never be sure of that, of anything that's so old. But what we can be confident in, that if something has lasted for so long, as a result of it being tried and tested continually over all of that time, 2,569 years, then there has to be some substance to those teachings, doesn't there? And that is the case both for Theravada and Mahayana, as well as Vajrayana, Tibetan, Zen practices, scriptures. I've never really differentiated between the two, only to clarify what I use as my grounding and my basis of understanding. What is the mind's relationship to consciousness? How do the two relate? Or once again, look at these talks I've given about the 5 khandhas. The mind, if we refer to the mind as the citta, is that which knows, the observational point of view. Whereas the consciousness, if you're referring to vijnana, is sense consciousness, coming really as a result of the bodily aspect of our being, which is not self. So we have rupa, the body, vedana, feelings, sanya, recollection of those feelings, sankhara, mental formations coming as a result of those feelings, all coming about through vijnana, consciousness or sense consciousness. This is contact with all experience, external and internal, so the physical feelings of the body and the thoughts of the thinking brain, as a result of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking. Whereas the mind knows that. So when you're feeling happy, the mind knows you're happy, but the mind is not happy or sad. When you're feeling sad, the mind knows you're sad without feeling happy or sad. It is observational, it is observing. This is the mind that knows. Unlocated. When I say unlocated, I mean unlocated in either the physical body or the thinking brain. It's not part of that computer that's dealing with sense contact. The relationship is that's how we experience ultimately, and that is the qualities we're developing within ourselves through this practice of the mind. Could you please explain what it feels like to be in samadhi during a meditation? How long does it normally take to get to samadhi? And you do say, of course, this is different for everybody. So there's no benchmarks again. How does it feel? This is something, how would I describe the colour yellow? How does it feel to be in love? How does it feel to make love? You can't describe these things. These aren't easily describable because they're intangible feelings, emotions encompassing everything. But I can tell you what it's not. It's much easier to describe the feeling of samadhi as what it is not, like it is more easy to describe the understanding or our understanding of Nibbana, the ultimate attainment, through what it isn't, rather than what it is, because it isn't anything of this conscious existence. It isn't of this conditioned world. So samadhi is seclusion from the 5 hindrances to some extent, and seclusion from bodily feelings to some extent, progressing eventually into the first jhana, which is deeply absorbed states of samadhi, with total seclusion from the 5 hindrances, and total seclusion from all bodily feelings and the thinking process. You can't describe that other than what it isn't like. As for how long it lasts, it doesn't matter. 1 second to 3 hours is the same. It has no time aspect to it. It is secluded from sense consciousness, which is related to time. It's related to us knowing the time, experiencing feelings to appreciate the passage of time, the aging process, the getting uncomfortable if you're sitting for a long time process is all related to time. And in samadhi, there is none of this. You're secluded from that. So that's as close as I can get to describing that experience. But when you experience samadhi and you come out of samadhi, you will feel your heightened sense of awareness will immediately give you a much clearer view of all experience And this is where we get the word vipassana coming from, seeing clearly. This is how then, after spending time in samadhi, we can see more clearly the qualities, the characteristics of existence, like anicca, dukkha, anatta, and really understand them experientially rather than intellectually through that experience, that clearer view. Why is a lotus used by the Buddha so often? Or in Buddhism? Well, yeah, it will. Yes. The lotus flower is often used, yes, by the Buddha in the sutras, by way of a good example of really purity coming out of the mud. This is one aspect of a lotus flower. So it is unseen. You might have mud in a pond from which comes this beautiful flower, the lotus. This is one, forgotten the word, simile of the purity of our minds coming from what is basically defiled through the kilesas, greed, hatred and delusion. There is the bud of the lotus within us, which is why it's a very useful depiction of the teachings of Buddhism. Also, once flowered, it is very resilient as a flower. If you put water on it, it rolls straight off. It has this sort of finish to it that the water just comes straight off, and any soiling or dirt as a result of that also comes straight off. So it's very resilient. So it's beautiful, it comes from the mud, and it's very resilient. And this is a very good analogy, this is the word I was looking for, analogy for the Dharma as a whole. And those whom become enlightened as a result of the Dharma, such as the Buddha and his noble Arya Sangha, the Arahants of the past and present. Is meditation just relaxing? It can be just relaxing, but it's not really just that. It leads to far more absorbed states of meditation, as I was just describing. But I'd rather hear it described as just relaxing, but not just. I'd say that's a very positive thing to do. People don't relax, they don't sit and do nothing. They sit and engage themselves in entertainment or distraction of some kind, or doing something else, eating rather than anything else. They don't just sit and allow their body to just naturally relax. This only normally happens when people go to sleep. And then when you're asleep, you're not awake, so you're not aware of it. So if meditation is just relaxing, that would be a good thing if people did it. But often meditation is some thought-provoking process of concentration and analytical study. That is very much not meditation. So I'd rather you say it's just relaxing than contemplation. Meditation is neither. It is some way of allowing the body and the thinking brain to settle in order that you can come about these realizations naturally. Realizations are nothing new. They're not revelations. We're just experiencing the peace and tranquility the Buddha has shown us how to experience through this simple process, this simple activity of developing samadhi. So another big long one there I didn't highlight, so I'll get to it, but you have to bear with me. If there's not a concise question, I think now, anyone who's been watching this a long time, I'm not an intellectual monk. I don't sit here and talk about one word and its meaning and all of that. I take the practical applications of the Dharma, put them into practice through acts of body, speech and mind, and talk to you about how that relates to worldly life as well as monastic life. This is a practical study, if we dare call it that. It's a practical use of Buddhism, not creating a thesis on a subject just for the sake of talking. Right, so saying that, here's a long one. Let's give it a go. I have highlighted it, so I must have seen some question in there. I explore stories of those who claim to recall past lives. The majority of them describe past lives as being a king, a prince, a doctor, a great musician, military general, large landowner, queen, or something other noteworthy societal status. Very rarely do I hear past stories of someone being a thief, murderer, beggar, or some scoundrel. I am very suspicious of the veracity of such stories. Could you elaborate on these curious recollections? And you're also saying in there somewhere, I think you said that it seems to be rather biased towards good previous lives rather than bad previous lives. Well, of course, that is the nature of karma. If you've been a thief, a vagabond, a scoundrel, even as you include there a military general, if it's involving a lot of ordering of killing and such like, you're not going to be reborn into the human realm with the Dharma, where you might recount tales of past lives. You're more likely to be reborn in less fortunate realms, the animal realms or the hell realms even. So it would make sense from a karmic point of view that any tales of past lives, if they're able to be spoken about at all, would be of good past lives, because that is the nature of karma and rebirth, isn't it? However, I'd be very suspicious too of any such tales. Firstly, any monks describing their past lives, other than the Buddha, in the Jataka tales, which are almost also commentarial, they're descriptions of stories he told his closest disciples, so part of his own Sangha, then that isn't a monk whom you can really trust, because we're not allowed to talk of our own attainments, including experiences of past lives, specifically in relation to our practice within this life. So, and personally also, I haven't actually ever heard any of these recollections from any teachers that I've valued, listened to and learned from. None of my teachers have ever had cause to say, oh, well, when I was living this life as such and such, as you describe, a landowner, a general, a doctor, a prince, a king, then I've never come across this. So where you've come across that, I don't know. But in terms of karmic principle and rebirth, then yeah, the logical scenario is that you would have had a good life previously. You wouldn't have been a murderer or a scoundrel. As far as the veracity of such stories, veracity, what does that mean? Validity, or the number of stories. Could I elaborate on these curious recollections? No, I couldn't. I'm getting bitten now by these ants. How? That one really hurt. So, no, I would just choose to ignore them, practice, and find out for yourselves. So this is interesting, because these didn't bite me before. Okay, right, so we've dealt with that. I sometimes find myself becoming attached to stages of deep absorption, previously for the enjoyable sensation and more recently as an indicator of successful meditative practice. This inevitably leads to frustration where, for whatever reason, I struggle to enter them or lose focus while meditating. So this is all back to that trying too hard to re-experience previous experiences in meditation, isn't it? Then it doesn't work. Becoming attached to the stages. What stages? Take away the stages. We talk of these stages in Samadhi, we even talk of the jhanas. They're not really part of the practice. They're ways we're trying to educate ourselves, come to an understanding of what we're looking to aim towards. Don't think of them as signposts through your meditation practice. Oh, I've reached this stage. Now it's so nice. I'm going to try not to cling to it because there's another stage coming. Just let it go. Go with the flow. Right, so as you absorb into meditation, you become secluded from thoughts of the past and of the future. Allow that to be just like that, experiencing the present moment here and now. And let your mind experience, but remain focused with its awareness on the meditation object. As soon as you're thinking about these stages, you're not focused on the meditation object, and therefore you won't actually get into samadhi real. You're just experiencing samatha, which is peace and tranquil states of mind, calm states of mind, resulting in perhaps even piti and sukha, which is physical rapture and mental joy, but not deeply absorbed meditation leading into jhana. So if you're thinking of them as an indicator of successful meditative practice, again, you're using markers. You're trying to grade yourself. You're trying to reward, I've got to this stage, now that's it. You may never reach that stage ever again, or you may bypass that stage next time. It's not like that. In learning to swim, in learning to ride a bike, you'll get a balance, you'll get the ability to be able to float. Then with the progress of your practice, like meditation, with swimming or with riding a bike, you will be able to become stronger and fitter, swim for further distances, ride your bicycle for longer distances. You'll be able to ride your bike faster, you'll be able to swim faster, swim in different styles and in different conditions. You will develop the practice, the activity, and enjoy it more and get further with it, progressively, slowly, not in fixed stages. Initially, that stage of being able to float, that stage of being able to balance, is much like that stage of being able to absorb into samadhi, but not necessarily so. It's not as clearly defined as that, because the absorption into samadhi can be very short, can be long, you can be distracted from it. This is as a result of how well you've developed the powers of concentration. So once you've learned to balance, or once you've learned to float, you don't fall off or you don't sink. But once you've learned to establish samadhi, you can come out of samadhi very easily through distraction. And once your powers of samadhi develop to levels of jhana, where you're totally absorbed, then you won't so easily be brought out by distraction. So forget about all that, forget about trying, forget about what you've achieved in your stages. You've achieved nothing until you're enlightened, really. You're just practicing towards you're practicing the Noble Eightfold Path towards enlightenment. Do you think we spend too much time worrying about what comes next instead of living in the moment? What are your thoughts on how mindfulness can shift our perspective on life and mortality? So my thoughts don't matter. I'm just reflecting on what the Buddha teaches us. And as far as life and mortality is concerned, we get old, we get sick, we die. Why does that need to be more complicated than that? That is just this physical body and this thinking brain. There's no real such thing as mortality. We'll be reborn, or we can attain to freedom from suffering in this lifetime and no further rebirth. As far as spending too much time worrying about what comes next, of course people do worry about the future, and they also regret the past. There's no point regretting the past, and really no sense in worrying about the future. But yes, we do have to make plans for the future, even plans in our practice to sit and meditate for a certain amount of time, because most of us have something else to do. So planning a little is okay, but yeah, worrying about the future, restlessness and worry is all of this. It encompasses all of this. One of the 5 hindrances to meditation, restlessness and worry, being worrying about the future or the past. But bringing out the antidote to that is to bring our awareness, our attention just to the present moment, here and now. And then you are experiencing the characteristics of existence as they are. As far as mortality and life is concerned, well, we reflect upon this every day. continually. Our bodies are reminding us of that. So Nibbana is emptiness, and then brackets, as in emptiness of inherent existence, as the Dalai Lama puts it. So I'm not sure quite where that's out of context, perhaps, what His Holiness the Dalai Lama might have said. Nibbana and emptiness, Nibbana is something more than emptiness. Emptiness, sunyata, I've again spoken about it recently, is really where we are absorbed in meditation without secluded from physical feelings, sense consciousness, and mental thought or proliferation. Allowing ourselves to really experience the present moment here and now without judgment, without that hindrance of restlessness and worry or any of those 5 hindrances. And this is sunyata, this is emptiness. Nibbana is a far deeper and permanent attainment of such an experience, but once again it's indescribable. Really what you're saying from repeating this quote is that it's emptiness of inherent existence. That is how the Nibbana is being described. Yes, of course, because Nibbana is not of this conditioned world, so it contains nothing we have knowledge of being inherent existence. It is neither anicca, dukkha, anatta, Nibbana. Neither is the citta, anicca, dukkha, anatta, the mind, because it is not, they are not of this conditioned world, whereas everything else is. Sunyata is an experience separate from Nibbana, leading towards Nibbana, but a glimpse of that experience of Nibbana. Maybe one more. I highlighted one. Rebirth could be compared, for example, to one of those cases where a person gets hit on the head and their personality changes. They lose their memories, etc. They still have consciousness, but it is not really them. Is my understanding correct, or am I missing something? So you're not missing something specifically, but that's not really the nature of rebirth. If you're hit on the head and you lose all memory, you're losing the thinking brain's content. You're still going to be experiencing the same physical body, and you're still going to be experiencing the same thinking brain, albeit having no content. So this isn't rebirth, because you're not reborn into another realm, another time, or another physical body with a different thinking brain. The citta is still attached and remaining tied to this existence with some reminiscence of its previous life before that individual was bumped on the head or whatever. So it's not quite how I would describe it, but I'm describing it all the time. So like with all of these things, I know they're not very well documented by way of their titles and descriptions, any of these comments or the videos, but even if you just began watching them from today, if you continue to watch them, these questions, these talks, these discussions are cyclical, they revolve, they're instigated by your comments, but we're talking about one subject and one subject alone, and that is the Dharma, the core teachings of Buddhism. And that is a continually revolving subject, which is why it's described as the wheel of Dharma, the Dharmacakra. And centered on the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, I continue to talk about subjects that relate to all of our everyday actions of body, speech and mind, and how we can improve upon our lives to develop contentment resulting in happiness. This is a continually revolving subject, so you continue watching these talks from today, and here on after, you'll come across all of the answers you're looking for. So what is rebirth? I'll not necessarily answer that question specifically every time, but it is continually coming up as it's a fundamental core aspect of right view. It is part of the Noble Eightfold Path, and as is karma, part of the Noble Eightfold Path being an aspect of right view. So Continue to watch. Don't feel you need to find all the answers, although they do get something happens to them by YouTube to make the questions be more specific in chapters, they call it, or something, if you go back. But your questions do come up over and over again, and I don't mind the repetitiveness of that, because there is only so much one can really talk about. Now, I think I said just recently some silly number, I don't know where it came from, but there are 10,000 suttas, not hundreds of thousands of suttas, but there are 10,000 or getting on, or a bit over 10,000 suttas. They're all talking about the core teachings of Buddhism, the fundamental aspects that we have to come to understand to have right view, that all things are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and out of our control or not self, that there is karma, all we do that's good will result in good, and that what we do is bad will result in bad, and that rebirth is very much the reason we are here, as a result of ignorance. So avijja, ignorance, is a result of birth, and birth is a result of ignorance. So it's circular. That's the 12 links of dependent origination, how they revolve also in a circular fashion. And that is just an expansion on the Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, rather. The Four Noble Truths in themselves also contain the Noble Eightfold Path, being that the truth of there is suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering is leading us to that understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So again, it all revolves in a circular fashion. But you can listen by way of recollection of these fundamental aspects of Buddhism, and reminding ourselves of what we're practicing and why. And always remembering that the reason why is because we want to be happy, and we want to understand that happiness comes from contentment, not from acquisition. And the more you listen to these talks, and then the more you, as a result of that, meditate, practice, and are able to keep the precepts as the foundation of that meditation practice, the more you'll see the benefits of that, the more rewards you'll reap, and the more enthusiastic you'll become about your meditation. A few of the questions are about, or I'm coming to, are about that, maintaining enthusiasm for meditation, or it being a chore. It shouldn't be. It should be something we enjoy. If it's not, don't do anything you don't enjoy. You're not here long enough. You're getting old, you'll get sick, you'll die. Don't waste time on tasks other than your duties and what you have to do that are not ultimately enjoyable. But if they lead to temporary enjoyment and then further suffering, these are what need to be identified as the cause of suffering. And this is what this repetitiveness is continually doing, reminding us of those reasons, what it is that we're experiencing in this life. And with that note, until next time, I hope there's something useful you can use. If not, just leave it and let it go. Don't let it trouble you. And till next time, be happy and stay well. Suki ho too. I should go and attend to my new range of ant bites. And not much you can do about them, but there we go. It's beginning to rain.